My name is Kristin Snowden, and today is a third video on a series of videos that I'm doing on relationships, healthy relationships, unhealthy relationships, toxic relationship cycles. And today's video is on what is gaslighting and why it's so dangerous in a relationship. My first two videos, my first one is on a very toxic relationship cycle called the love addict, love avoidant model. I'll link it below. My second video is on defining what makes a healthy relationship, an interdependent relationship versus a codependent, unhealthy one. In both these videos, I talk about why we struggle with intimacy with others, why we struggle with setting boundaries, why we struggle and oftentimes lose ourselves in our relationships. I encourage you to check those out. Today's video is something that occurs within my first two sets of videos, the toxic relationship cycle and an unhealthy codependent cycle. This subject is called gaslighting. If you haven't heard of it, I implore you to listen to this video, regardless of the fact of whether you found me because you've been miserable in your relationship or not. It's just because it's a subject matter that I want every human being out there to understand, really understand. It is prevalent. All of us do it. I do it. Some people, I receive it as well. Some people do it in more intense, more emotionally abusive types of ways than others. And it is extremely important that you understand what gaslighting is, how it may be present in your current relationship, the steps that you need to take to relieve yourself from ever being exposed to gaslighting. Now, in my work with couples, I find that there are three heavy hitters in relationships that can cause ourselves quite a bit of pain and hurt and crises. These three heavy hitters are betrayal trauma. So it's exactly what it sounds like, which is the trauma of being betrayed. I write an article about it on my website, and I'll link it below so you can better understand that. The second subject is betrayal blindness. It's when you know there are signs that things within your relationship, the dynamics within your relationship, are not healthy. And of course, in retrospect, like when the breakup occurs or when you find out that there was the affair or that your partner had some kind of addiction of some kind, you obviously look back and realize there were so many red flags, but you decided to ignore them. That is called betrayal blindness. I have an article on that as well, and I'll link it below. The third heavy hitter in relational trauma is called gaslighting. Now, despite the fact that all three of these heavy hitters are quite prevalent, we as a society don't discuss these three subjects. Instead, we just find that we're miserable in the relationship, that we stay in the same vicious relationship cycle. We keep seeking out partners that draw us into the same problems and the same pain, or we stay frozen in the same bad relationship. I wish that our society educated all of us on these three subjects, including the two topics that I talk about in my previous videos, because once you put a name to these behaviors and you really understand how they're present in your life and in your relationship, you feel more empowered to fight back or to make sure that they don't exist or to change the patterns that exist in that unhealthy relationship if you want to stay in it. So let's start from the beginning. Most of my clients, when they come in just in complete crisis, in relational crisis. They expose that they're unhappy with their partners. They expose that there's some kind of infidelity. They're on the brink of divorce. All they know is that they're miserable and confused and lost. However, upon hearing their stories more and more, I can pick out the maladaptive patterns that exist. And one of them is often that they lose themselves in the relationship. And one of the number one ways that I find that we lose ourselves in a relationship is when we're in a relationship where there is a lot of gaslighting. Gaslighting is a form of psychological and or emotional abuse where someone consciously or unconsciously gets another person or manipulates another person into believing that their reality is not their reality. Gaslighting is a term that came from a 1940s film with the same title. The storyline goes that a man is secretly trying to get a woman's fortune that she doesn't even know exists. So he kind of seduces her into marrying him. And when they're living together in her home, he slowly makes her believe that she's insane. The way he does it is he takes pictures down and he says, "Why did you take this picture down?" He gives her gifts and then he hides them and says, "Oh, why did you lose that brooch that I gave you?" The other thing is she hears noises in the attic and the lights dim. And she asks him about the lights dimming and he says, "I don't know what you're talking about." So in that movie, he does this very consciously and strategically because he has a very specific purpose, which is to gain this woman's fortune. In our relationships, gaslighting is much, much more insidious and much more hard to identify. But yet, when you really start understanding it and seeing how it happens in your relationship, every one of my clients has this aha moment that kind of frees them from the crisis, frees them from the unhealthy cycle. It's important that you realize that most gaslighters don't even know that they are trying to manipulate you into not believing your reality. Most gaslighting occurs, again, like when I describe those codependent versus interdependent relationships. So there's always one person kind of above the other. Another person is kind of set up on a pedestal and has more power in the relationship. That's the type of environment that breeds gaslighting. Because the person that's on the higher level is highly, highly invested in maintaining power in the relationship for whatever the reason. So they're very highly invested in making sure that they are right, that their reality supersedes your reality, and that you agree with them. The three most common relationship dynamics where I find gaslighting to be present are the following. I find them to be present when clients are with someone who has narcissistic tendencies. The reason for that is because narcissists, as you know, they assert a sense of grandiosity, greater than thou, that they're better than everybody else, they know better. Often they're kind of like a parent and you're the child in the relationship. And as you can imagine, it's because they are highly invested in maintaining that identity. Their value and identity is in making you think that they are correct. Because if they were to ever show their true self, which is a very insecure, scared person inside, they would lose their power. And quite frankly, it's usually that they don't want you to know that they're so fragile and so flawed, and that's just really scary for them. So they gaslight you. The second type of relationship where this is really common is in any kind of relationship where there's addiction. So a partner has a current addiction, drugs, working, gambling, sex, and they are highly, highly invested in making sure that you don't know what they're really doing. So if she really knew how bad of an alcoholic I was, she wouldn't love me. So when she smells alcohol in my breath, I tell her she's crazy. When she asks why the money is disappearing from the bank, I give up some kind of reason. But the whole point is they're highly invested in making sure that you don't know the truth, but you have these instincts and they keep telling you something's wrong. The third type of relationship, because I get a lot of these types of relationships in my office, are when there is infidelity, when a partner is cheating on another partner. This is a crazy making part of the relationship, and oftentimes it's less about the affair that occurred and more about the insidious lying and manipulating and gaslighting that occurs during the course of the affair. So the wife or the husband will ask the cheating partner about the blocked phone calls or the late nights at work or why they weren't returning their calls, or the person at their office or their friend that seems a little too flirtatious and seems to cross boundaries, and they know that something is off. They feel it in their instincts and intuition, and they keep asking, what's the deal? But the cheating partner is highly invested in making sure that partner doesn't find out that they're having the affair. They want to keep them in the relationship, but they want to continue the affair. So the only response that they have is to gaslight them. So we'll get more into details of what that looks like. Let me give you a few examples of gaslighting so you can better understand, because I really want you to understand how this infiltrates our relationships, all relationships. So one example is you're in an argument with your partner and you state that partner just said something that really hurt your feelings. And instead of the partner saying, you're right, I shouldn't have called you that name, or I could understand why me saying that would hurt your feelings, they respond with, look, you're so sensitive right now. Are you on your period? And immediately it shuts you down because you become shameful of that idea that maybe you're crazy because you're on your period and you lost your rational thought process. Another example is when you ask your partner to meet some kind of need of yours, whether it's I need a date night, or I need more time with you, or I need to talk about some kind of emotional things a little bit more. And again, instead of the partner kind of validating what your experience is, what your reality is, the partner dismisses your request and just says, look, I'm not the problem here. You need to just stop being so needy. Another example of gaslighting is when you're in an argument with a partner. And again, you often find the gaslighting, pretty much 90% of the time you find the gaslighting is when you're in direct conflict with that partner. And so there is like a power struggle during that conflict because you have two different perspectives, two different sets of feelings. And again, that partner is highly invested in being right, in seeking approval, and the other partner is highly invested in being approved of in the relationship. So you're in an argument with your partner and you're getting upset and angry at the topic. And that person stops and goes, whoa, you need to calm down. You're getting really out of control. You need to check yourself. You're becoming irrational per your usual. But again, your instincts are telling you, no, I have cause to be really upset. There's money missing in our account. You never came home last night, or you just called me a bunch of names, whatever. It's when you feel like you have the right to be upset or angry, and someone just dismisses that and says, no, you shouldn't be upset and angry, you're being crazy. I have this a lot where I have couples where one partner kind of begs the other person to go to couples therapy because they find that their marriage is not going very well, and that partner will respond, maybe you should go to therapy because you're the problem in this situation. Another form of gaslighting is when a loved one insists, look, you don't even love me, you don't even care about me, and you feel like banging your head against the wall because you feel like you've been going out of your way trying to please that person and trying to show them how much you care about them. Another example is when a partner will tell you, you know what, you need to get over this, when you feel like you're still struggling with that particular subject or issue, or you don't feel like it was ever resolved or dealt with. Because I deal with infidelity a lot, I commonly get the story of the many times the partner comes up to the cheating spouse and says, I know something's going on. Are you having an affair? And the partner responds with, you know, you're crazy. You need to go on medication. This is why we're having marital problems, is because you are so jealous all the time and you're so insecure. Maybe if you were a little more secure or you had more sex with me, we wouldn't be having these problems. But the reality is that that partner is having an affair, and that person's instincts are correct. Also, just generally speaking, gaslighting is also anytime someone attacks you with any kind of shame triggers to really shut you down and end the conversation. Because again, they're in a place where they're really invested in staying up here. So to have a disagreement or an argument or a conflict with you where you're trying to be validated and you're trying to be seen in that relationship, that's really, really intimidating to them. Because remember, their value system is one where they are up higher than you, where they're smarter or more grandiose, or they can't be wrong. They can't be seen as vulnerable or flawed. So they usually have to just shut you down really fast with some kind of shame trigger, something that really gets you right here. Those can be, you know, God, you're so selfish, or man, you're a bad mom, or maybe your intelligence, mock your intelligence. Maybe say that you are inconsiderate, or again, that you don't love them or act like you love them. Anything they can identify very easily. Gaslighters are really great at identifying where your soft spots are, and they go for them because they want to shut down that adversity and conflict really fast. Because again, it's not comfortable for them to accept that you guys might just have two different opinions. So I described what gaslighting is. I want you to understand that those examples may not sound very emotionally damaging or emotionally abusive, but the part that is so confusing and crazy making about these gaslighting statements are that when they're pervasive and they just keep going, you continue to feel invalidated. And there is damage that's experienced from being gaslighted, from being invalidated. You start questioning your sanity and your intuition and who you are as a person. And when there is this kind of tangible form of abuse, like domestic violence, where there's obviously someone punching another person or physically harming them, or when there's these obvious name calling, where you're screaming cuss words and horrible names at somebody, we all understand that to be abusive. And we can, it's much more tangible to us to go, ooh, this is a very abusive relationship. I got to get out of this. However, gaslighting does not tend to come with obvious, invisible bruises, violence, or abusive statements. I mean, sometimes it can get abusive, but it's very under the radar. However, when a trusted loved one is constantly dismissing your feelings and thoughts, and then replacing it with that other person's perception, with that other person's reality, and that other person's interpretation, it can lead one to doubt their sense of self, who they are, where they came from. It's extremely confusing. So the symptoms that I often look for when clients come in to see me, whether or not they've been gaslighted, is I do explore how strong of a sense of self they have. And again, I talk more about that in the second video. At the end, I give a quiz on whether or not you've lost yourself in a relationship at the end of the second video, which is linked below. So I look for that. And I often look for these very obvious statements where most people will know that that is not okay, but that person presents it to me in a confused state. So do you think it's bad that that there's like $2,000 missing in our bank account and I don't know where it is? Or, you know, I found a bunch of naked pictures on my husband's in his email, and I tried to ask him where they came from, and he just yelled at me and said I shouldn't be looking at his phone, and I'm a horrible person and I'm not trustworthy. Should I be upset about that? So I look for people who present confusion about what their boundaries are and what their non-negotiables are, because it's a really important thing to hold tight to during a relationship. Because as I mentioned before, our sense of self, or maintaining our sense of self, is imperative to maintaining an equally balanced, interdependent relationship. To be healthy, we need to know who we are, what we stand for, what our values are, what our non-negotiables are. And when we are constantly being invalidated and told that we're irrational or crazy or overly emotional, we start second guessing ourselves naturally. Even more so if we have a personality where we really want to please somebody, or we really want to show them that we can understand their perspective. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. So that further feeds this idea that maybe we are irrational. Maybe we are over emotional. And it sends us down this downward path of losing our sense of self, not trusting our instincts. And it sets us up for more betrayal, more abuse, and quite frankly, cycles of insanity. The long-term outcomes of regularly being gaslighted is often, you know, chronic depression, chronic anxiety, very, very low self-esteem or self-confidence, and that feeling like you've been doing your best all the time and it's just never working. It's never making an impact. Anyone can gaslight and be gaslighted. It's anytime you are not comfortable with showing that you're flawed or wrong or able to harm somebody or doing something nefarious, whatever. I want you to now understand what types of behaviors you do that open yourself and expose yourself up to a gaslighting type relationship. I want you to understand your part in the gaslighting cycle. Not only does gaslighting occur when there's an imbalance in one having more power than the other, it's also magnified when the person down here constantly seeks that person's approval. Their value system is strongly dependent on seeking this person's approval. So you're more prone to accept their version of reality, their perspective, and their interpretation because you look up to them. Again, almost like a parent-child relationship. The second part that really primes you for a gaslighting relationship is what we call the empathy trap. The empathy trap it's really interesting. So many clients, especially let's say therapists, we strongly value the idea that I can see your perspective, I can see your point of view, and I'm so good at understanding where you're coming from. That's a value system that's really important to me. But at the same time, it can put me in this trap where I suddenly let someone else's perspective, someone else's reality trump mine. I talk about this a little bit in the video, the second video, but it's called the empathy trap because you're in this relationship, you seek this person's approval, and you want them to say, okay, I love you, you're great, you're wonderful, everything, so you feel validated. And at the same time, another value system you have is, they're barking at you, telling you that you're being irrational, or that you don't love them the right way, or no, they're not having sex with their secretary, or they don't know where that $2,000 went in the bank account. And you really, really value seeing their point of view, seeing that they're hurt or they're sad or they're scared. And so you can't tolerate standing kind of up to their abuses, their gaslighting, their manipulation, their potential lies, or the fact that your intuition is telling you that what they're saying does not make sense in your head. But you want to show that you're empathic, and you let that trump your own intuition, your own perspective. So it's really important to understand that in a relationship, you can always validate someone's anger or hurt or pain. It does not mean that it ever trumps your experience. So they could find something that makes them mad, or you could have said something that upset them, or behaved in a way that upset them. You have to really dig deep and listen to your instincts and intuition and decide, did I do that to hurt your feelings on purpose? Am I being manipulative? Am I lying? Ugh, yeah, that feels gross. So either you own up to it and you apologize for it and make amends for it, or sometimes you have to say, look, I didn't do to harm you. I'm really sorry. But again, their experience, their hurt, their anger, whatever, never, ever, ever invalidates your experience. And it's a very delicate balance between the two in long-term relationships.